Okay, so now it's recording. Yeah, I'm going to assume no one's ever used watercolor in their life before. This is my palette. You can use any kind of palette you want. If you're hard pressed for one because you don't have anything, use a plate and cover it with wax paper. You can use a Tupperware because watercolor will rinse out, or if you're using the one the board gave you, you can use those little pads. So I'm using the watercolor I have because the board did not give me anything. So what I'm going to do first is put down my ground color. Sorry, I have to, my watercolors are, so these are my watercolor paints. Mine are, since I use watercolor in my actual practice, mine are professional level, so these are really good watercolor paints. You guys will have probably student level. I do have some student ones swinging around here, so this is a student level watercolor paint. You'll probably have the Reeves, which are the ones that I used to use when I was a student, so they're pretty good. What I'm going to do is first I set out what I need. So for you guys, it will probably be, it depends on your color. So because I'm going to do a lot of gold in this design, again, my letter is very, very simple. It's not very like decorative yet because I'm going to show you, I have two other decorative ones. I'm just going to use this to show you how to do watercolor. So what you want to do is if your background is going to be yellow and you want to use a yellow tone, you start with that. What I'm going to do is I want to do a yellow tone, and then sorry, I'm being terrible here and I'm using my teeth to open these things, which is bad. I'm going to use this tone, which is a dark brown. Ugh, that's really goopy right now. There it goes. All right, this is dark brown. It's called sepia. The reason my paints are really goopy is because they're older. So the older a watercolor paint gets, the harder, less viscous it is. So watercolor is suspended. It's like a pigment suspended in something called gum arabic. And what happens is gum arabic eventually dries. So for example, this is a gold pigment that I was using last time I did this project. So it should show you it's been a little bit since I taught grade 10 art. And if you look, this pigment is almost completely dry. Like it's like powder at this point. It's goopy. I would have to add a little bit of water, like clean, clear water to that to give it some viscosity again. But with watercolor paints, it's different. So I'll just let you guys know right off the bat that watercolor is my medium. So this is, everybody kind of has something that they're super, super comfortable with. This is what I'm super comfortable with. Like I could pretty much do this in my sleep. So what I need is a palette, a paintbrush. I am going to be using these. They're dollar store paintbrushes, so you don't really need anything expensive. Just using that for now. And then I've got my cup of water. It's stained because I paint in the same cup all the time, but it's just clear water. So first thing I do is I'm going to create a ground layer. So that means I take the base color. So for me, that's going to be yellow ochre. For you guys, it's going to be whatever color you want it, your letter's going to be, or your background's going to be. And you do something called creating a wash. Now what a wash is it's very, very light watercolor. So I'm taking the pigment and I'm mixing it with lots and lots of water. And then when I put it down, I always test it on the side of my paper first. It should come in as not a solid color. And then what I do is I paint the entire area with that color. I think I'm going to need a bigger brush. So don't mind me. I'm just switching to a bigger brush so that I can work faster. You'll see powder coming off of it. That's the acrylic paints. So again, making my wash, just using my bigger brush. Okay, what I'm trying to do is cover the entire surface. So if you are painting with one sheet of watercolor, thing I recommend doing is putting it on the painting surface. So what you're going to do is use some tape and tape it down, because when the water starts to rise up, it can make the paper go really wrinkly. So if you're also trying to do watercolor on computer paper, the paper will bubble up. The best way to counteract that is to tape it down somewhere. So you'll see little like bits coming out, and that's because this was an acrylic brush and I'm just reaching for it. I don't really have all my watercolor brushes on me right now. What I'm trying to do though is paint over my pencil lines. I'm locking them in. So once you paint over watercolor pencil lines, you cannot erase them anymore. They are stuck there. That means that you have to have settled on your design and erased any guidelines or any lines that are not going to be included in your final design. So like I said, this is just a very, very basic design. I'm not trying to, doing any kind of crazy decorative work with this one. That's going to be with the other two, and I'm going to show you that with the acrylic paint and with the pencil crayon demo. So I'm almost done. The cool thing about watercolor too is that it dries super, super fast. You're not supposed to ever like sop the water on. It should be a pretty light layer. So you might not be able to see it. Maybe if I turn that off, you can see it a little better. The entire surface of my letter here has been painted with that light color. So I'm going to put my big paintbrush away because I don't need it right now. And what I'm going to do now is get a slightly smaller paintbrush. So I'm using this one right now. And I'm going to use this sienna. So for some of you, this might be black because you don't have sienna. For some of you, it might be dark brown. It might be dark blue. So when you're painting with watercolor, you always want to go dark to light. Or sorry, light to dark. Sorry, backwards. So I take my darker shade first, and then you almost like shade it in, like you're doing a black and white painting first. So I've got this dark color. I'm going to shade in the areas that I want to be that darker color. Almost like, again, black and white painting. And what's going to happen is that when I shade these areas in and I paint over top of them with color, the shadow will carry over. Watercolor isn't like pencil crayon or acrylic. It's almost like painting like stained glass. You have to always assume when you're painting that the color is going to shine through. Okay, and so also you might be seeing a little bit of bleed. If you start painting and there's bleed, meaning that it's going over the lines, it means your paper's too wet. So I'm being bad and I'm just doing this for the demo's sake, but my paper is actually a little too wet to be painting right now. I probably should have given it a little more of a chance to dry. But yeah, it's mostly shading in, just getting in those areas that I want to be a little bit darker. And then what I do with my very fine brush, so now I'm using this very tiny brush, is I wet it, I use just a little bit of the watercolor and a lot of the pigment. So this is going to be very, very dark. And what I use for that is to put in my details. Okay, so I'm putting in my dark shadows with this. And again, wait till your paper dries. I'm just being bad. Okay, so this is supposed to be the most dark areas that I'm painting. So obviously this very, very dark area is not going to be everywhere. It's just going to be on those incredibly dark areas that you want to highlight. So if I have any designs too, I'm probably going to use this dark area or this dark paint to bring out those designs. So I find what helps me is think about it like shading in with a pencil. If you were drawing this with a pencil, this paint would be your darkest area. Okay, so like again, if this had designs in it, I would be doing the designs here with the darker. All right, so you get the basic idea. Generally what I'm trying to do is create a monotone colored drawing of my watercolor. You want to wait to dry between layers, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it a chance to dry, and then I will record how to put the actual color into it. But you want to start with one ground layer, then you're going to take the darker color that you use. So for me, I use dark brown because yellow and brown go together. If you're using a different color, it's usually like gray or black. And then I shade the letter almost as if I was shading it like it was a pencil drawing. All right, so that is step one with watercolor. I'll stop there because I don't think anyone's going to get past step one today. If you do, let me know and I can continue with the demo. And then later I'm going to do the pencil crayon demo for those people who don't have any paints and want to use pencil crayon. And the acrylic demo will probably be tomorrow.